Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. We are happy that you have joined our session today. My name is Refaat. I am a private sector specialist with IFC's employability program, Vitae, and I will be moderating this session. Today, we want to talk to you about employer engagement. We know that many education institutions, including some of our clients, struggle with this. We also know that engaging industry can have huge benefits on creating relevant programs, education programs, and most importantly, equipping your students with the skills and knowledge that they need to become employable. A topic we know you, the educators, care about deeply. So we decided to dedicate this webinar to the topic, and we will be focusing on two modalities of engaging industry. One, program advisory committees, or PACs for short, and two, applied research. We have selected our speakers to represent different areas of expertise and also different geographical locations. So you can get an idea of how engaging industry plays out in different economies, developed versus emerging countries. Now, I am delighted to introduce our guest speakers representing the panel. We have Professor Ismael Al-Hinti, who is the president of Hussein Technical University, HTU in Jordan. Previously, he was head of the mechanical engineering department at the Hashemite University, followed by a tenure at the German Jordanian University. And besides his rich academic experience, Dr. Al-Hinti is also a renowned expert and leader in the field of renewable energy applications. We have Dr. Peter Constantino. He is Associate Professor at the School of Public Policy and Administration at York University in Canada. Peter is also Academic Director of the Ontario Legislator Internship Program. He is one of Canada's leading practitioner academics. And we have Leonardo Lima, our education and employability specialist for the Vitae program at IFC. He leads assessments and implementations to improve employability services at higher education institutions. And before joining IFC, Leonardo worked as corporate relations director at IE Business School in Spain, creating alliances with global organizations to conduct applied research. Now, I'm sure you will have questions for our speakers. So we have a dedicated Q&A session towards the end of this of the webinar. I encourage you to share your questions in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. It's different to the chat box. And by the way, the questions are not, they don't go public. Only the panelists and myself can see them. Now, before I move to our panel, I would like to get a better understanding of who is online with us today, you, the audience. So we have a question for you. Maka, if the first question could come up. Do you engage with industry as an education institution? Single choice. So yes, we do have program advisory committees and/or applied research and/or work integrated learning. Or yes, but it is done in a less systematic way, or no, we do not engage with industry. So I'll just give the audience 15 seconds to for you to put in your selection there. And then once we've got the responses, Maka, we can show the results. Okay, so most of you do engage with industry, but in a less systematic way. Okay, good to know. So another follow-up question to that. so we can get a better idea, again, even dig a bit deeper. So next question, Maka. Do you find it difficult engaging with industry? Yes or no? And then as soon as the results are available, Maka, you can share them. Yes. Okay. So most of you, yes. Okay. So you are on the right webinar today, if that is your response, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. So let's move to our speakers. I'd like to start with you, Leonardo. So before talking about how we can engage industry through applied research, could you tell us first what exactly is applied research in a nutshell, and how is it different to basic research that universities conduct anyway?
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you, Amy, for having us today. It's a pleasure to talk to the audience. Well, applied research is scientific research carried out to resolve a specific problem. So the difference between basic and applied research is that basic research is research carried out to acquire new knowledge and understand the foundation of a phenomenon. And what are the facts that can be observed around it, right? The results or the outcome of basic research is a general conclusion or a theory that are valid at any context. It means that the results are atemporal or timeless. Whereas in applied research is scientific research carried out to solve or propose solutions to practical problems. The results are only valid for that specific context of study. It can be in the form of prototypes, clinical studies, reports, or even vaccines. An example that I like to give when I'm doing these workshops for IFC is the example of COVID-19. So basic research was carried out to understand COVID-19, the virus, and its effects. Then understanding the virus and its effects, applied research was carried out to propose solutions against that specific virus, right? To combat contamination and the worst effects of the virus. So the results in that specific case are the vaccines that we know.
Okay, that's a very good distinction there, very easy to understand. Understanding the virus versus creating a vaccine, a solution. Okay, so if a university wants to, or a college wants to conduct applied research, what does it entail exactly? What does it look like? What do they do exactly?
Well, first, I wanted to differentiate applied research when we're talking about employability, right? So when we're talking about employability, we're talking about building industry partnerships, right? A lot of universities already perform applied research with public funding, but to boost employability, universities need to create links with employers. And applied research is a great way to do so because it's an engagement with value add to the industry partner that offers business solutions to that industry. Now, to your point, there are a few ways applied research can be conducted in favor of employability. So one type is faculty-led research. That would be a service that the university will offer for a fee. A contract is involved. The industry partner will be the sponsor. The research is led by a research team from the university, and it may include a project management staff and the company employees. The academics here are the main researchers. Well, it's important here to allocate that project management role in the university team to guarantee specific deliverables and deadlines that are subscribed under this contract and agreement with the industry partner, right? Another form or modality of applied research involving the students would be having applied research as a work integrated learning modality. The university would work with an industry partner on a problem-based project which the employer wants to solve. Students would work on it guided by a professor. And in this case, it's a win-win situation for the company and for the students. For the students, they get to work with a potential employer and work on multidisciplinary tasks. For the company, there is no contract involved. They don't need to allocate specific office space, and it's free of charge. They only need to dedicate some time to support students through the process with the industry expertise and giving feedback. This modality is often known as project-based learning or challenge-based learning, and it can be worked as part of the curriculum.
Okay, so two ways basically, if we're speaking about employability: either integrate it into your work integrated learning modality, where it's mainly the students doing the research, or under your research, which is led by your faculty members, in which case the industry would be paying. Okay, that's very helpful. And could you give a couple of examples that you've seen in your experience, like what has come out of this?
Yes, of course. I will start with the student-led research, the work integrated learning modality, right? So Tec Monterrey University, which is a well-known university across Latin America for its challenge-based learning approach, they offer to first-year management students a course that involves a challenge given by an industry partner. So for example, last year, the challenge was done in partnership with Coppel, that is a Mexican department store. And students were asked to provide business solutions to overcome the impact of COVID. You know, many of the brick and mortar stores had to be closed during quarantine. And the winning group designed virtual tours in Coppel stores with virtual dressing rooms where clients could see themselves wearing the garments. And that is really a way to overcome that initial problem that was proposed by the industry partner, right?
Wow, that sounds like they've developed the future of shopping.
Very interesting.
I hope we get to see it.
Definitely. Actually, there are a lot of innovation around this this problem of having to close stores after COVID, right?
Right. So now we know what it is. The main question, I'll come to the main question, that is, how do you engage employers on applied research? So how do you approach them? What's the pitch?
So a very important point here is that a university needs to be proactive about it. When we talk about the work integrated learning modality or the student-led research, the goal is to provide students practical experience. So there is, in this case, no finance involved. It is interesting for the company because there is no legal binding, no need for contract, as I meant, no salaries for the students or office space. And the benefits are many. To start with, having students working on a given real world problem guided by professors. These are people from outside the company providing an independent assessment that will provide insight into innovative solutions for free. And other reasons that motivate employers are brand positioning as part of their CSR and brand visibility. You know, the company supports the university research to generate cutting edge knowledge and share it with society. Another reason can be to access talent. The company may establish a preferential relationship with the university community with access to the faculty, to the career services, to students and the alumni network. Having straight up access to talent. And finally, and which I find interesting, is that it can also generate motivating experiences for internal talent within the company. It may support specific pillars of values of the company, its culture and vision.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like some really good selling points there. Okay, thank you, Leonardo, for sharing your experience in Spain and Mexico. And now I'd like to hear how a university in the Middle East is thinking about engaging industry. So Professor Ismael, could you first maybe tell us a bit about your university, about how you approach engaging industry in general and your approach to employability before we move on to applied research?
Yes, thank you, Amy, and it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you this afternoon or this morning, depending on where you are. HTU, or Al-Hussein Technical University, is the youngest Jordanian university. It was established only 5 years ago, but was established with a very focused mission where we embrace employability as a strategic goal for the university. And in doing so, we start by having the location of the university. The university is hosted in King Hussein Business Park, which is the industry and business hub in Amman. And as far as I know, we're the only university in the Middle East that is hosted in a business park, where the students get the opportunity to rub shoulder with business leaders and entrepreneurs and interact with international and local companies and startups from day one. Also, the programs that we offer are laser focused, where we say that all the programs are demand driven. We're focusing on engineering and information technology, and we try to be as close as we can to the needs and the evolving needs of the market. And based on that, we try to basically adjust the programs and the program outcomes to meet the demands of the employers. In recruiting the faculty, we try to focus on faculty members who have industry background or industrial or business experience. So you would find that the vast majority of the faculty members at HTU, they do have an industrial background. Me, myself, was an entrepreneur and CEO before coming back to academia to lead HTU. And this is the spirit that we try to have within HTU.
Okay, so it sounds like you're very committed to employability and you have some strong connections that are dedicated to being aligned with industry. Now, I know you engage with industry in a number of ways. I'd like to focus on applied research first. So what does HTU do with regards to applied research? And taking Leonardo's framework of work integrated learning and lab research, where does HTU fit there? Does it do both? Does it do one of them?
Well, as an applied and technical university, we're very keen on applied research and not open-ended blue ocean research. In this regard, we approach it in two main paths. The first one is the research that is led by a faculty member. In this, we try to encourage the faculty members to focus on identifying and working with industry to identify problems and challenges that are real challenges being faced by the industry. And we try to encourage the faculty members also to involve students in their research projects. So if you are a faculty member at HTU and you want to get funding for a research project, first of all, it has to be applied. Secondly, you get more points if you have an industry partner. Thirdly, you get more points if you involve students in your research. You get also more points if this research can lead to a product or some commercialization aspect of this research or patent registration and so on. The other part or the other path is where the student is actually at the core of the research project. When the students embark on the apprenticeship, which is what we call, or the name we have at HTU for work integrated learning, and it's an 8-month experience with employers. So each student has to do an 8-month long work integrated learning. They do also during this period what we call a research project. We identify a problem or a challenge, and the student takes the lead on this with the assistant or with the assistance of an academic mentor from the university and a workplace mentor. So they define together a problem, and the student works while working and getting the experience with the employer. The student works on solving a real life problem for that employer with the involvement of the academic mentor. The results usually are or at least from what we see with the first batch and the second batch of our students, are very, very encouraging.
I'm going to come to that because I have 2 questions coming up. So I definitely want to hear about the actual live examples. But before that, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying about the funding. So you said they would, faculty members apply and they would get funding. Does that mean the industry is not paying for this? Is not like in the example that Leo was giving, or how does it work?
Well, in Jordan, one of the challenges that we find is that we need to build the trust between the universities and the industry. And the industry is usually very hesitant in investing in research projects, either led by students or led by faculty members, because you need to build the trust that they believe genuinely that something positive is going to come out of this research. So in this regard, we try to support the faculty members and the students, and we need to be, and I agree with Leonardo, we need to be proactive and to take the lead in supporting the research, at least with some seed money, until there is some outcome, or there are some positive indicators that this is going to be a research that is going to solve the problems or some problems for the industry. And then you see the industry encouraged to invest in co-funding this research. But we take the lead in this.
That's a really good tip. I think is going to help our audience going forward on this in a country where industry is not used to academia coming in and being very collaborative, to first of all start off with some seed funding before going to them and saying, come in and fund it. That's a great tip. Could you tell us about what your students have come up with? You said they've come up with some solutions. Well, we'd like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there are dozens of examples that we can come up with. One of the good examples was a student who worked with a company, agricultural company. He was an electrical engineering student, and he came up with a control system to control a set of water pumps that basically consume the majority of the energy on that agricultural project. And he managed to reduce the energy consumption significantly by designing and implementing and building this control system. On another occasion, a student worked with a factory for hygienic paper, hygienic tissues, paper tissues. The problem that he approached was how you can verify and control the exact number of tissues in one packet. And he came up with an innovative solution that was adopted by the company itself. So I mean, there are many problems that the students have found solutions for that we as faculty members could not think of when the students were starting their apprenticeship.
That's amazing that what they're coming up with, that real solutions to companies' problems. And how do the employers react? Do they get a job offer immediately? What happens?
Usually this is the case. Usually the students are offered a job or a permanent job contract before they end their work integrated learning experience, and during the time that they are working on the research project.
That's amazing. So inspiring, and a very good reason to do more applied research. So now I think we have a very clear idea of what applied research is, how it's conducted in different parts of the world, and its benefits. I'd like us to switch to the other modality of engaging industry, and that's program advisory committees. So I'd like to turn to you, Peter, our expert on PACs, and ask you, first of all, could you tell us what exactly is a program advisory committee, like in a nutshell, PACs 101?
Sure, thank you, Amy. And I too am very grateful to be part of this distinguished panel. For the longest time, universities have worked very hard to educate students. Colleges, polytechnics have worked very hard to train them. But what we've noticed in the last 30 years is two factors. First, the scope and depth and pace of change have been so rapid that keeping up with that change has been an ongoing challenge for institutions that plan curricula years in advance, that do things on a longer scale. The second part of this is globalization. We are having now to prepare students not just for local economies, but for a global economy, and in particular with regulators enforcing key performance indicators, with boards of governors and directors in the public system and in the private system putting pressure on these institutions to perform. There's been a great effort to try and be better at what we do. And so the concept of PACs emerged as an opportunity, then a best practice, and now just, it seems the only way to proceed. And this is the idea that you would engage with employers and your alumni so as to benefit from their understanding of what that marketplace or that industry needs. And so we engage them as volunteers on a committee, on a program level, to try and meet the needs of those programs. And with that, we have an army of volunteers working to try to help that program be the very best it can.
Wow, okay, an army of volunteers to help make your program better. That sounds like a no-brainer to move forward on. And exactly, how else are you going to keep up with this pace of change in the world today? Okay, I'm totally sold on setting up a PAC. How then would a university go about this? Like, what would it entail?
So senior leadership empowers program leaders, the dean or the chair of the program, to establish a PAC. And the idea is first to go through a process of learning more about what your goals and objectives are. What do we need? Do we need curricular reform? Do we need fundraising? Do we need equipment? Do we need employability skills built into that curriculum? Do we need co-ops and practicums and internships? And once we identify those needs, we look to the sector. We start first with our alumni. Who has been in the program, has graduated, and now occupies a position of leadership? Can we bring them back to help their alma mater? And then we look beyond other components of that industry, and we look for people who want to contribute. And then once we've identified those folks, we have very explicit conversations with them. We talk about what the needs of the program are. We talk about what the expectations are in terms of time and effort. And we try to ensure there's a good match between that person's skills and ability, but also their interest and desire. And when we have a good match, we have a group of people that can meet regularly. Some PACs meet 2 or 3 times a year. Others will meet once a month, and they will work towards delivering on those goals and objectives. Each of those individual members becomes a champion of the institution. And they're out there working to help the program be its very best.
That's a really good tip you gave there in the middle about alumni, because I was going to say some universities don't have a link. So I suppose alumni would be a good way to link up to industry if you don't have any links to begin with.
So I can tell you from personal experience, I've experienced the PAC in every possible way. First, as a graduate of my university, I realized that while my professors were absolutely wonderful, I didn't really have the precise skills that my employer was looking for. So the learning curve was steep, and the requirement of the employer to train, and in some cases to educate, was significant. So I've often thought, I could have transitioned better. And then as someone worked for the government as chief of staff to the Minister of Education and Training, I saw the value of the potential of this connection, and we ensured that we mandated it. So many parts of Canada, the colleges sector is required to have a PAC at every program, at every level. So not clusters and not sort of big advisory committees, but actual program-related committees for every single one of them, and to report on their progress. And now, as an academic who has both been a PAC member and someone who has worked with a PAC, I see how working together helps to inform and to improve. And so the PAC can function when very focused in delivering results that the university just can't do on its own. And with those extra hands, those extra bodies, we ensure that our programs are as relevant as they can be, and our students have as many opportunities as they can.
Right, and when you're approaching these industry players, one important question, are they paid or is this volunteer based?
This is a volunteer thing, and my experience has been that people feel quite honored to be asked to serve. That in many cases, especially in parts of the world where we don't have an experience of a PAC, this is a very new concept. It's not run of the mill, it's not the everyday ask, and people are quite honored. But my experience has also been that sometimes they think this is an honorific thing that doesn't require work. And so that's why those explicit conversations are had. We don't pay them, but we honor them in many ways. So it's not uncommon to have a celebration evening dinner where the president and the provost will acknowledge the work. They are usually highlighted on the program websites. We sometimes give them access to the facilities of the university, so they may have a gym membership, for example. They would be invited to convocations and other ceremonies, and they would be acknowledged for their work, but it is entirely volunteer. Many of them tell me that it helps to advance their careers, that their employers and the industry that they work in sees them differently as a bigger player. And they, on a personal level, get great satisfaction, particularly if it's their alma mater, of giving back to a place that had given them so much. So we don't pay them in money, but they often feel well compensated.
Okay, that's a really good experience to hear from for our audience that would like to set up a PAC. Start off with alumni that are really interested, want to pay back, and honor them in some way. I'd like to pick up on something you mentioned, Peter. You were saying about how in Canada now this is an obligation, it's mandatory to set up PACs, but obviously in emerging markets, this is a new concept. It's definitely not mandatory. Would like to hear, do you have an example of how it's been a bit different, maybe, for working in an emerging market versus in Canada where it's obligatory?
So in many of the places where I've had the pleasure of working, it is such a new concept that people are a little skeptical, or they don't know how to operationalize it. So for example, some universities exist in communities where there aren't large employers that understand this, small, medium-sized employers. They need some education. So we have to do some work to set the groundwork for their interest and their participation. So in some cases, there's work to be done. Some markets where, for example, fundraising isn't yet an evolved practice, it's hard to go out to engage people to give money to programs, particularly if they see those programs as being, public sector colleges or universities. So we have some work to do there. And in other cases, we'll also see that public universities, for example, that aren't perhaps as motivated by a kind of competitive marketplace where the seats are always full and people come because they have a virtual monopoly. There's some reluctance. Let's just focus on doing the very best we can to educate. The challenge is we must constantly have an ear to the ground. What is it that our students want? And what is it that industry needs? Well, we can hear from the students quite clearly that they want an education and training. They want to be job ready. Our industry would love it if those employees came better ready to hit the ground running, but they haven't traditionally been involved. And so we've got to do some work to show them that this is the kind of thing that is a global best practice. We can make it easy to manage so that it is not too much work, because remember, these volunteers do this on the corner of their desk. And if we can show them that we respect their time and we use it quite carefully, it's driven by a very focused mandate and purpose. The conversation was very explicit. This is what the expectation is. We have laid the groundwork for a very positive engagement. So sometimes we do have to build a little bit of education into the what is this thing and how does it work, but very quickly people get it and they're proud to be a part of it.
Thank you, Peter, for sharing that. That's interesting to hear. And I'd like to go back to Jordan, Professor Ismael, to hear about how your university is applying this in an emerging market where it's not mandatory. And I understand you have a slightly different structure than the one Peter was just talking about, but same idea.
Yes, the idea of PACs is not as institutionalized as Peter has explained, at least in Jordan. What we try to do is to engage employers through different channels. One of them is through the boards, the different boards that we have at different levels. So at the program level, at the school level, and at the university level. So it is mandatory to have members from industry and from the local community and business contributing at different boards, and they meet regularly, actually more often than 2 or 3 times a year. Sometimes this can be once every 2 months. And they participate as members, and as if they were faculty members, they have equal voting and voting power, and they can express their opinions regarding and give their feedback regarding the programs, how they are delivered, how they are designed, the curriculum, and so on. But in HTU, we have recently adopted a new approach, which we called this initiative HTU Industry Fellows, where we, in each program, we're trying to identify 5 leaders in different fields related to that program. And we try to approach them and convince them to be HTU fellows, where we don't ask them to be working as full-timers or even part-timers, but contribute around 3 to 4 hours per week of their time to either deliver part of a course or supervise and advise students on career opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities, or mentor the students on projects that they are currently working on. What we are finding is that those HTU fellows are becoming the ambassadors of the business ambassadors of the university in the domains that they are in which they are leaders, and the impact that they leave also on our students in understanding what emerging technologies are about, what are the opportunities that are available and that are out there in the business and industry world. It is really amazing. And in the instances where we find an HTU fellow actually delivering a course, you would find that these courses are the most popular because the students can feel the relevance and they can see that they are getting not only knowledge that is theoretical, but also knowledge that is coming from a real practitioner. This is basically the approach that we have been adopting. We're also committed to formalize PACs as well in HTU. So I don't see employer engagement taking place with one approach, but I think it is a variety of approaches. Not each approach can work for everyone, but having a spectrum or a variety of approaches can give you the result that you're looking for.
Yeah, that's such an innovative way of pulling people in a region or where industry is not used to collaborating, this fellowship system. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to move to our last question for the panel before we move into Q&A. So with you, Professor Ismael, again about engaging industry. So you has mentioned the problem of lack of trust. Industry still in MENA, at least in the Middle East, it still doesn't really trust academia. What would be your advice to education institutions trying to engage and overcoming that challenge?
I would say the first thing is to be proactive and put yourself in the shoes of the employers or the industry partners, and to deal with them as partners. I think one of the problems that we have seen is that in many instances, people in academia approach industry or see partnership or working with the industry as just a CSR approach or CSR exercise for the industry. And this is completely wrong. When the industry can see that this is becoming a burden, they just quit this relationship or cooperation, and they don't want to speak to you anymore. The best approach is to define your value proposition as an institution, and try to understand what is it there for the industry, what is going to be appealing for the industry. And each employer or each company is different from the other. So some of them are looking for exposure, some of them are looking for a pipeline of talent, some of them are looking to share facilities probably that they have and the university has. Some of them are looking for getting apprentices, or some of them are looking for some collaboration on research projects or challenges that they are facing. So you need to understand your partners, deal with them as partners, not as donors, because at the end of the day, they are businesses, and they need to see the value. And this is why you need to define your value proposition as an institution and tailor it to the needs of your industry partner.
Okay, so treat them as partners and identify a win-win. Okay, great. And then I'll very quickly go to Peter and Leonardo before we jump to our Q&A, so we have enough time for that. Peter, if I were to say like one tip, what would you give universities, the one basic tip to set up a PAC? What should they do first?
I think first is to really take a hard look, do a SWOT analysis. What is it that we really need? And set out a manageable series of objectives. Be very focused in those conversations. Keep the scope of what we're trying to accomplish doable. Engage with those partners with the kind of respect Professor Ismael has spoken of. And be real. It has to be genuine. We cannot invite them in and say, we want your ideas and help us make it better, and say, we can't do that, we can't do that. That's not what we're going to do. It has to be real. There has to be empowerment to build a curriculum or to build these relationships that is genuine. Win them over one at a time, and you will have a PAC that is accomplishing things. Those quick wins will lead to an energy and a buzz that will demonstrate to others the value of these partnerships for better preparing our students for those marketplaces.
Great. Okay. And Leonardo, if I were to ask you for one piece of advice to universities that want to engage employers through applied research, what would you say?
Well, one advice I'd say is don't be shy and showcase your expertise and outreach capacity, right? You have the team of experts to show that you have the ability to do and perform the research, that your pool of students are a potential talent for the company, and the relevance of your network in the community ecosystem. I think this would be a piece of advice.
Excellent. Okay, so now we have heard from all of you. I'm going to move into the Q&A because we have some questions coming up. I'll start with the first one. I will direct that at you, Leonardo, because this is related to applied research. And I'll also maybe ask Professor Ismail maybe to also pitch in. How long does applied research usually take? Or what's a recommended timeline? So what would you say to that, Leonardo?
Well, if we're talking about faculty-led research, this is something that should be defined right in the moment of the engagement. Applied research entails defining deadlines, deliverables, and all the specifics of the engagement with the industry partner. If we are talking about a work-integrated learning modality, I've seen different examples in many universities, from the period of a semester to periods as long as 1 year for students to work on this project.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't get the last bit, the time frame.
Yes, so I was saying that when we're talking about work-integrated learning modality, I've seen examples of universities that work applied research in a course as long as 6 months or up to 1 year.
Okay, great. And Professor Ismael, is that in line with also what what HTU does?
Yes, I fully agree with Leonardo on this. It's usually between 6 to 12 months if we're talking about applied research. And if it involves industry partners, I think it is important to set up the expectations from day one, because the impression that the industry has is that academics are more laid back and they take ages and they don't work with deadlines. This is the impression that industry people have. So as academics, we need to be realistic and we need to to work according to our expectations, but also tailor for the expectations of the industry. They don't have the luxury of time usually, but if they do, this is great. But in most cases, it's not more than 12 months.
Great. Okay, I think that's very clear. We have another question that's directed both at you, Professor Ismael, and then I'll ask Peter also to comment. How do you deal with cases where one PAC may be performing very well while another might be struggling because of personal capabilities or the dean of the program? How do you deal with that?
This is absolutely normal, and people are different, and we need to understand what would make a PAC member or an HDU fellow, in our case, click and deliver his or her full potential. People are different. We need to engage them in a personal manner in many cases, to be as close as and to them to understand what is it for them to be part of this exercise, and try to engage them. You don't have one recipe or one size that fits all. People are very different in their expectations and their qualifications or backgrounds, even in their personal characteristics, and you need to accommodate for that. And it's not an easy job. But it's part of it.
Thank you for that. And Peter, would you like to comment on that as well in your experience with PACs?
I couldn't have said it better myself. The truth is, while these are volunteers, this is free labor, it doesn't mean that it does not take effort on your part. A good chair is as attentive to the PAC as the president of a university is to the board or to the Senate. It is an ongoing concern. It requires a delicate hand. Even the best PACs have a kind of a lifespan and cycle where there are some quick wins and there's a lot of jubilation. Then we've hit most of our targets, and so less emphasis or some slower periods. And this is where we think of our succession planning. This is where we think of what we can do to bring new life to the PAC. And so if the chair is fully engaged, we can smooth out some of the rough edges. But every PAC has to be a focus of the program chair just like they focus on the other resources, the faculty, the administrative supports, the equipment, the facilities. I mean, this is part of the team, and they need attention, they need time, and we have to be sensitive to that.
Okay. And now we have a question which I will direct at Leonardo. It's on patents and intellectual property rights. Any issues we need to keep in mind for the outcomes of applied research, and who owns that patent? And then I'll also then come to you, Professor Ismael, on the question of how this applies in the context of an emerging country.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this is something that is going to be agreed on contract. However, I advise universities to be extremely careful, and it's important that the university establish its own policy on the conditions of engaging with industry partners to sponsor applied research and research centers. The university needs to set the ground to protect its credibility and the independence of its research teams. For example, the institution needs to be ready to respond to adversity in case the outcome is not what is expected by the industry partner, and ensure that their research is published or done in the end how it was agreed.
Right, so basically you need to set up that from the very beginning in the contract.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And think of an institutional policy. It's the smartest way.
Right. And Professor Ismael, how has this been playing out in Jordan, in your case?
In our case, this is a very important question, but it should not scare universities from engaging with the industry. I think the best thing to do it, as we did in HDU, is to adopt an IP policy, a clear one, that is that is adhered to whenever we engage with an industry partner. We share this policy, we're very transparent about it, and if there is going to be a contract that is governing the relationship between the student or the faculty member and the university and the industry partner, usually this is outlined at the very beginning. And it is really important to do so. And we do the same now with even the startups that we are hosting at our incubator, because we do have also at HDU an incubator where we're hosting now around 17 tech startups, all working on new innovations and that could lead to patent rights. So it is important to have an institutional policy in place.
Okay, institutional policy in place. Great, thank you. And then I think we have time for just one more question as we're coming to an end. Have you seen, and maybe I'll ask Peter on this one, are you seeing employers engaging with academic regulators and vice versa on what should be taught at a university? Because many markets, especially in Southern Africa, are heavily regulated, and universities may not have as much flexibility unless approved by regulators.
In many places, particularly in the case of Canada, where we are moving away from a manufacturing economy more to a knowledge economy, industry, labor, the university sector, college, polytechnic, and other industry associations, they're coming together and they're saying, how can we work together to have the best educated and trained workforce in the world? And what it usually leads to is the creation of relationships and activities that are essentially the packs. And so more and more, it's in everyone's interest that we do this. I mean, think of an employer, for example, who can have someone leave academia and start with all the skills and knowledge they need to hit the ground running. Think about ways in which they can partner so that executive training occurs and they're continuously learning as part of their professional development. And that continuous learning leads to credentials and other things that allow for those individual employees to enhance their credibility and position in a marketplace. And so it's happening partly out of necessity. We got to work together to be competitive, but it's just so very practical and commonsensical that we can't imagine we didn't do this sooner. And here we are, and successes are feeding successes. And so it gets around. And those that are struggling, as we've discussed before, very quickly get supports. And they are then able to perform better, and it feeds more success. So it is a bit of a vortex, drawing people in who see its value.
So start small, create a success story, and then hopefully people will come on board, including the regulators. Okay, unfortunately, we have to wrap up as our time is up. So today we've learned some good points about how to engage employers and industry through applied research and PACs. I'd like to thank our guest speakers, Peter, Professor Ismael, and Leonardo, for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience. Thank you. I'd also like to thank everybody for joining. I hope you now have some good ideas on how to move forward on engaging employers. There are so many benefits. And if you have any questions about the IFC Vitae program and how we might help your institution on employability, please don't hesitate to contact us on the contact us option in the email we will be sending out with the recording after this session ends. And looking forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.